like the song was really appropriate for me because I spent yesterday at a practitioner meeting with Reverend Michael, and part of our time together was spent embracing the cosmic, recognizing that even though we are human beings and earthlings, children of the earth, I suppose that's what earthlings is, right? Lings. But just that we are not merely the carbon beings that are walking around in our cells, that we're not merely this, that we, as the scientists tell us, that we're made up of the same things that the stars are made up of. That when you start having this grander, wider experience of who and what you are, so many of the challenges and the worries and the fears, the doubts, the frets, the disappointments, the hurt, the harm, the traumas begin to dissolve. And I heard Jesse play in a way that I hadn't heard him play before. And I heard everybody leaning into this space that Sheila had carved out and that we're now sort of languishing in. That began way before you guys decided, yeah, today I'm coming to Soul Center. You know, the establishment of this space is connected to a space that was started 33 years ago. So I'm here and I bring greetings from Reverend Michael Bernard Beckwith on behalf of Agape International Spiritual Center. I don't always say that, but I do feel that way whenever I come. I do recognize that this is not merely just me coming to give a talk, but it's me as a part of a continued legacy. It's me as an outpouring of something that was started before I knew of something called Agape International Spiritual Center. Back when there was a place called Agape Center of Truth. Before it evolved. Back when Agape was a part of United Church of Religious Science. What were you doing 33 years ago? All of us were born, I think, in this room. Maybe not. You might have one or two that snuck in. Yep, there's the other one. I knew it. It was like I felt something. And yet the seeds for their existence and a place and a space for them were being established way back then. And there's just so much that we learn from our history. There's so much that's available to us, and we don't always see the patterns. You could chart the pattern of American history on a timeline, and you can see the peaks and valleys of things. You can chart the timeline of maybe your relationship, your marriage, or your relationship with your mother or your father. And you can sort of chart the peaks and valleys of those relationships. There's an ebb and a flow to life everywhere. And you can also see in your own life the goals that you've established, the visions that you've accepted, how your career has changed and transformed, how having children changed or transformed you, how not having children, how not having a marriage, how being single, how marrying, how divorcing, how all of these different aspects of you have charted and changed the course of your life, and yet none of them are the truth about you. Now, the single thing that I've described so far is the truth about who and what you are, except for at the very beginning. We talked about you being a cosmic being. You have a body, but you're not your body. I know that there's something very challenging to kind of analyze and embrace and fully walk in, especially if we're talking about you're not your body and I'm telling you to walk in it, right? But the reality is all of us have known or seen or witnessed people who have amputated legs or have lost an arm or have lost their sight, and they're no less a fully fledged being. But there's something about us that seeks to become aware of this great vastness. And so the theme of the month here at Soul Center is one that I just found a very beautiful experience seeking to navigate to see how Spirit was going to speak through me to the idea of gratitude, plenitude, and magnitude. Everybody say those words with me. Say gratitude, plenitude, magnitude. And for all of us, the words have their own frequency and tone. They have a meaning for us based upon our life experience. Some of us struggle with the first idea of gratitude. Some of us struggle with the second idea of plenitude, and I wonder how often any of us really think about magnitude, because that's really what came to mind as I sat with them, how often I think about magnitude. And so then I started to be with the presence and allowed it to work on me as I prepared to be with you guys today. And I started to continue to observe world events as I do, and I continued to see how things were flowing, and I recognized that even within everything that is happening, while I was doing that, the one constant was me. I'm the one observing. I'm the one seeing these things. And so I had to take a moment and see if I could step back from all of these ideas that I was thinking and everything that was going on for me. What is this, that, and the other? What were the experiences? What was going on in the news? What was going on in sports? What was going on at my job? What was going on in my relationships outside of me? If I could depersonalize it. If I could instead be objective and rather than subjective. Instead of defining these things based upon me, the subjective, define them based upon those things isolated as they are. And that's one of the most challenging things to do when it comes to looking at your own life. How do you make choices as you move through your day, except for that they're primarily based upon you, right? You're choosing, for the most part, what you eat and what you drink based upon you. I don't know that many of us think about the impact of what we're eating and drinking on the planet. Though the vegan movement spends a lot of energy, and different health movements are spending a lot of energy helping us to realize the impact of what we're eating on the planet. You can watch many documentaries that talk about the carbon output and the impact of the beef industry, for example. And so people started moving over to milk and started analyzing, well, how milk is impacting us. And while this is not a talk and a lecture about what you eat, stay with me. You can have whatever you had planned on having after service. You can still eat and drink whatever you want. But when they moved away from meat and they started thinking about milk and started pulling away from milk, and then almond milk became really popular. Well, that was a little challenging in California, because as the popularity of almond milk went up, then they started realizing how much water was needed to create the almond industry in California in the middle of a water drought throughout the state. So the unintended consequences of making these choices over here had a reverberating effect to these other areas over here. And I would sit back and I was like, oh, so oat milk is a thing. I think they're now telling us that that's a better, sort of impact. And the fortunate thing about that sort of equation that I designed is 50 years ago we hadn't woken up to it. That there have always been vegans and vegetarians. Sometimes different groups of people were that way because of their neighborhood and the environment that they lived in, and it was just a natural consequence. They just didn't approach animals as to be consumed, right? And so there were all of these different ways of being in the world. And then here we are. We're trying to figure out how to be healthier. We're trying to figure out how to make a positive contribution to the planet. We're trying to figure out why there's so much violence in the world. We're trying to figure out why all of these things are going on. And for the most part, we're dealing with the effect. We're dealing with the thing that is showing up. And very seldom do we actually go to the root of it. And at the root of it, sometimes we go back a couple of steps, and we get to society, and then we go back a couple of steps, and maybe we get to capitalism. And we go back a couple of more steps, and we get back to another idea of culture, and we get to race, and we get to gender, and we get to sexuality. We get to these constructs, and very seldom do we get to source. Very seldom do we back up far enough in our contemplation of things till we get to source, till we get to the thing that's behind it all. And I'm definitely not talking about something that was in a book, because there was a thing before books. And I'm certainly not talking about the thing that's like been emblazoned on a tablet, because there was a thing before tablets. And there were always people that were in touch with this thing, with this presence, with this idea, but very seldom we do this because we are caught up in our own livingness. We're not necessarily going all the way back. But here's the thing. Within all that I've already said, you already have everything that you need. You have all of the information, you have all of the access, you have all of the resources. It may not seem that way when you look at your bank account because you're defining your resources based upon your bank account. It may not seem that way because you look at your relationships, you look at your family connections, and you base those things on those connections or lack of connections. It may not seem that way because you live in a state that's dealing with this, that, and the other. And other people live in a state and they have different priorities. And other people live in a state and we can't tell what they're thinking. We have no idea based upon their priorities. But we're not going all the way back to source. So the idea of gratitude, if we start with this idea of gratitude, and we don't just make a list, because that's one of the practices. People invite us to make a list of the things that we're grateful for. Yes? How many people have created a gratitude list before? All right, that's most of us. How many of you have ever created a list of the things that make you sad? It's okay. It's okay if you made a saditude list. It's quite all right. Let's do that again. How many people have ever just made a list of things that make them sad? Okay, just a couple of us. I wonder why we wouldn't look at the saditude list. Yes, I made that word up 45 seconds ago. And most likely it's because there's a stigma of not approaching the things that make us sad. As if a very real, natural part of who and what we are should not be approached. It should be pushed aside. Most of the time when people are sad, people will put their hand on their shoulder and, kind of pat them. When people are crying, they want to hug them and comfort them instead of allowing them to simply be with what is moving through them. Not a single person is defined by their tears, by their sadness, by the end of a marriage, by the end of the life of a partner or a child. None of them are that way. And yet there's still a part of us that still doesn't see them as they are. When are we going to make those changes? So the theme that I'm speaking to today is, how about now? And there's actually a question mark. Because the only person that can answer that for you is you. Right? You're the master of your fate. You're the captain of your soul. How many of you have heard that phrase before? It's a wonderful poem called Invictus that is inviting us into a particular way of consciousness, that is inviting us into a boldness. And yet, so much of our power and authority is given away. Whether it's we give it to politicians because we think that they're the ones that can make the best decisions, we give it to doctors, we give it to managers and supervisors, we give it to money managers. A lot of times we're giving away our choice and our power and authority even to ministers, even to priests, even to gurus and shamans and teachers of all sorts, instead of going to source. And there are many ways to go to source. There's many ways to approach it. And there are many ways to take on this idea of gratitude. So a moment ago we asked about gratitude. Many of you have made, almost all of you have made a gratitude list before. We talked about the idea of, well, what are the things that make us sad? What about an angry list? Have you ever made a list of the things that make you angry? A couple of you. I would say that that's a very important list. And I will invite you to take that on. Here's why. Anger is a fiery, passionate emotion. How many of you can think of something right now that actually evokes anger within you? I'm not asking you to get angry right now, so hold on. But how many of you can think of something that makes you angry? Just show of hands. All right? Keep that hand up. Right hand up for those of you that can think of something that makes you angry. All right? Keep that hand up. I'll give you some examples. Racism, child abuse, extortion. I feel like I can get something that gets everybody. Nuclear waste, and how it's impacting the planet. Now, how many of you, keep this hand up, can think of something that you're grateful for? Raise your other hand. And then I just want you to bring them together. This is our world. Our world is filled with things that will give us different emotional responses, but that doesn't define us or the world. The world is this magnificent, beautiful place. This world is this wonderful place where I watched this story that a friend of mine forwarded me of these two young boys at a charter school on the East Coast. And they saw another young boy that was at the school. And these are 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds. And they saw this boy getting teased. Even one of the boys was getting teased because of his clothes and how he spoke. And he found himself caught up in it. This was shown on Ellen's show a while back. And the two boys got together and they decided that it was wrong and that they were going to do something about it. So they went and bought with their own money shoes and clothes for this young man. I don't remember ever hearing a story like that when I was growing up. For all of the things that social media is and for all of the ways that it gets demonized, I get to see so much of the good of the world that is happening, even while the rainforest might be on fire, even while people are experiencing homelessness. It's not an only thing equation. It's always and will always be both and. For every traumatic situation, I did a reading for our daily prayer call, which many of you know that I facilitate online. You can always find it if you do a quick Google search for our daily prayer call. And I did a reading from Howard Thurman that talked about the seeming duality of life, where we seem to see light and dark, when it really is just all one thing. Yeah. The sun is shining in the middle of the universe, and we're all on a planet that simply spins around, and sometimes it's facing the sun, and sometimes it's facing away, but that doesn't define us, and it's the same thing about the darkness that seems to show up as violence, as murder, as rape, as sexual assault, the violence that seems to happen when people get thrown out of their homes, or people get thrown out of places because they're gay, or they're transgender, or they're dealing with all of these things, and at the same time, I heard a wonderful story, read a post on Twitter, more social media, where somebody was sitting at a table and they heard a bunch of teenagers talking and practicing using their transgender friends' pronouns. They were just saying, like, if we can figure out if we can practice right now, seeing so-and-so as she, so-and-so as he, or as them or they, because that's their preference, it'll make it easier on us. And for all of the people that I've witnessed in the world that have some traumatic reaction to a person that doesn't want to embrace the societal projected genders, these ideas, which are merely concepts. Every scientist will tell us that the ideas of gender are merely concepts. They're these ideas that are not pure and absolute. And yet, there are people that have just this revolting response to something that actually doesn't affect them at all. You don't have to start wearing a dress. You don't have to change this has nothing to do with you. And even if you're worried about your kids have the ability to adapt so much better than you because they don't have the 40, 50, 60 years of your issues. Thank you very much. They're not dealing with the breakup. They're not still trying to heal from your mother abandoning you and you abandoning your own children. No, your children are good. You're trying to figure it out. They're trying to figure it out. And they have access to more information. We just have to be willing to communicate with them. So when people start talking about the challenges they have about talking about two men kissing or two women kissing, I'm laughing because as long as your children are not asking you, why are you kissing that man, you should be okay. And they get to choose and decide how they navigate that. And you can figure out how to do that by simply taking a step back and going back to source. Because source, no matter what text, no matter what sacred text you look at, it doesn't tell us to throw anyone away. It doesn't tell us to reject anyone. Some ideas and concepts maybe, depending on what sacred text you look at. But it's still always at the core of every teaching, love. And so when we start looking at gratitude, and when we start looking at these ideas of plenitude, I'm still so interested at when we are going to start living these things out. Like there's an opportunity I talk about often when I'm before groups of people, and how when we move through traffic, And so often, our response to somebody cutting us off or almost hitting us is anger. We're so in our high level of pissosity around the idea of how dare they drive and let us be in their blind, I'm going to finish it for us, drive and let them be us be in their blind spot and almost run into us. Instead of the gratitude for not being in an accident. I remember when that changed for me, not the moment, but I remember noticing how frequently I was in the laissez-faire frequency of moving through the 405. Now you guys down here on this end of the 405 have a very interesting experience, and us all the way down in Los Angeles, over by the Wilshire, UCLA area, have a different experience of the 405, but it's all the same, folks. It's the same highway. It's the same field that we talked about earlier where things are coming and going. And you have the opportunity in this moment to fully move into gratitude. The person that you are right now has never existed before. And when I say that, I know you think of your history. You think of your parents, you think of playing basketball as a kid, you think of your previous relationships, you think of your first date in your marriage, you think of all of these things that you see as yourself, but you're the person who lived through those things. You're not the person in those moments anymore. You're not, because every single one of those moments changed you. They may have created trauma, or they may have opened you up. And the opportunity that we all have is to open up into the plenitude of our existence. And we can do it right now. We can open up into the idea that we are so much more than the coin of the realm. We're so much more than dollars and yen. We're so much more than the idea of what our job creates for us, what our retirement will look like. We're so much more than these things. And the invitation from Spirit is always to place our mind on Thee. How often are we moving through our days, through the hours and the months and the weeks of our lives, and we are not giving, even just for a few moments, our attention to the present? Just giving our attention to an idea of something that came and brought us forth into existence. How often do we contemplate the idea that there was something that very specifically thought of you, thought of me, and said, this very unique being is coming into human existence right now? Now, some of us may have sort of a little bit of a question and answer session with this presence with Source about the family that we were deposited into. Could have a conversation about the era that we were born into. You know, we look at the 60s and the 20s, and we look at the 1800s, and we think about the people who have lived through so much. And then we think about what we're dealing with right now. But 100 years ago, the experience, like looking at the timeline that I had us talking about before, life was so different. None of y'all women would have on pants right now. 100 years ago, it just wasn't a thing. And not because you couldn't choose, not because it wasn't available. The idea that you did not have the freedom to choose it is so significant. And so that's not a worry you have. The idea that you actually got to choose your partner and your mate 100 years ago was not free for everybody. We don't realize how recent so many of these traumatic changes have been, and we forget how difficult humans are to adjust and acclimate to change. It's just not easy. And I'm regularly now beating the drum of stop looking for easy. Just throw easy out with the easy bake oven. Just throw it out. It was never good. Nothing that came out of the easy bake oven was tasty. Susan, it was the worst. And the reality is we can handle it. Think about what you've been through. Think about the healing that's already taken place in your life, even before you entered into a teaching like this. Think about the scars that you've adjusted to, that are in your mind, that are on your body. And think about the beauty that others can see in you that you're still learning how to accept. Think about the power and the trust that people have placed in you as you're still trying to adjust to learn how to trust yourself. Think about the magnitude of that. When I was coming in this morning, for the first time in 3 years, I think since 3.5 years I've been coming to Soul Center, for the first time I missed my exit. Don't laugh at me. And please laugh at me, totally laugh at me. Unencumbered. So for the first time I missed my exit, and of course, right before I missed my exit, in my mind, I'm like listening to great music and I'm telling myself, I want to make sure I'm not too dependent on Waze. And so I see the name of the exit, and then of course, I'm like, wait a second, this was my exit. And so I had to do the loop down to El Toro, and not to El Toro, to right before El Toro and come back. So an extra 6 minutes, no big deal. I wasn't walking, so I made it here on time, right? And I began to wonder, because I knew it wasn't an accident, about what that was for. And it had really been a minute since I had a view of just a wide vista. And if those of you that have gone on that side, you start seeing the canyon, and then you can see all the way out into Orange County from there, and you can see the vastness. And then I got it. I missed my exit so I could get into the frequency of the magnitude of the presence. So often, we put God, Spirit, the divine, Jehovah, Allah, the great presence, in a box. And in that box, we are also combined into a smaller box. So it's like the Russian dolls. But there are so many layers between the first box of God and us in our mind. Because we think about prosperity and plenitude and beauty, and we think about health, wholeness, and happiness. And they're concepts, but we do not recognize them as our identity. Your identity is wholeness. You are wholeness. One of the things that Reverend Michael, when I talked to you about our meeting yesterday, he brought into our awareness, and my brother Carlton highlighted it while we were fellowshipping after, was this idea. Everybody close your eyes and just open your awareness right now. And I want you to recognize your body right now. You're familiar with it. You know where the moles are, the stretch marks. You know where the muscles used to be, where they are now. And then I want you to open your awareness, and I want you to be aware of your body as a space and a spaciousness. And now I just simply want you to feel your body. You don't feel your body with other parts of your body. You just move into your conscious awareness of that aspect of you that feels. This is not an intellectual pursuit. This is a function of your beingness. You are designed to feel. And as you hold this space, become aware of your feet, your knees, your back, your chest. Be aware of your liver, your lungs, your vocal cords. Be aware that even as you're doing this, the synapses in your brain are firing off. Now turn your attention to the part of you that was aware of all of that. That's who you are. You have a body. You utilize your body. If we wanted to in this moment, you could raise your heart rate by thinking about things that excite you, thinking about a game-winning shot, thinking about winning a prize or the kiss of your beloved. And you wouldn't have to move because you have the ability to access your own creative imagination. And so even as some of us are recovering from different maladies in our body temple, even as we are recovering and healing broken bones, and as cells are reproducing, our body is simply our vessel, our tool, and obviously we should care for it, and obviously we should do things to it, but we are not it. We have it, and it's simply in our field of awareness. Without opening your eyes, become aware of Laguna Beach. Without opening your eyes, become aware of downtown Los Angeles. Without opening your eyes, become aware of your childhood home. Without opening your eyes, become aware of the high school that you matriculated through. If you went through more than one, think about more than one. Now become aware of Soul Center. The truth and the reality of who and what you are. The gratitude that radiates from you. Eyes remain closed. The plenitude that is a true quality of your existence. It's who you are. It's a quality of you. The magnitude of what we know as the presence, that vastness, is you. You're not in a tiny box within a larger box. Not only are you not the box itself doesn't exist. The box would be like putting your hand in a box and walking around trying to pick up your socks with your hand in a box. You can't open and grab anything. Your hand's in a box. So in this moment, in this conscious field, we are dissolving all of the boxes. We are dissolving the boxes around relationship, friendship, family, connection. We're dissolving the box around our wholeness and anything that is happening in our body that we identify with. We're dissolving the boxes where we limit our own trust of ourselves, of the choices and the visions and our relationship with Source. We're dissolving the boxes. The walls are falling down. The top is blown off. The floor, the ceiling, the walls of the boxes have all dissolved. And we see the infinite expression of life itself that is us. The radiant energy, the powerful force of love that we are is unboxable. The peace which Soul Center anchors here, that we may know it for the world, is already going out into the world every day, wherever we go, because we are unboxed peace. The question is, when will we do it? The question is, how often we'll allow it? The reality is, there's only one moment. Now. So how about now? Are you willing to say yes? Are you willing to allow the fullest expression of that frequency, of that field, as you now? Are you willing? You know that there is an inner answer. I'm going to ask you to bring your inner answer to the outer expression. Are you willing?
Yes.
Are you capable?
Yes.
When will you do it?
Now.
When can you do it?
Now.
When do you have access to it?
Now.
In every now, You have access to it. You don't have access to Thursday, this past Thursday, that's gone. You may have access to next Thursday. But still, the only time you will be able to realize this, know this, and hold this is now. So when will you do it?
Now.
When will you allow it?
Now.
When are you capable of it?
Now.
So when you're having conversations with each other, eyes open, and as you begin to have these conversations with each other about healing, about transformation, about liberation, as you begin to have conversations with each other about the challenges in marriages and relationships, I'm inviting you to ask each other, when you have someone that's bringing something to you, how about now? Don't say anything else. Don't go into blessings or abundance or healing or transformation or liberation. Let a person say everything that they've got to say. Let them get it off their chest. And you can simply say, how about now? And they're going to, if they weren't here, they're going to say, what do you mean? It's like, well, are you done with that now? Are you ready for more? Are you ready for the plenitude, the gratitude, the magnitude of who you truly are to exist? You just simply say, how about now? And allow that, especially within this community, to trigger an awakening to that field that we were just basking in all together. Simply allow it to be the truth of your life. Yes?
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much. I didn't do much shouting, but I sure am sweating up here. So this is our time of sacred giving. Of course, we have bills to pay at Soul Center. Of course, you do. But even more than concerning yourself with Soul Center's bills, I'm inviting you into your how about now-ness. I'm inviting you to consider what you're inviting into existence. And I'm inviting you to allow your contributions to circulate out into this community, that they may come back to you as a greater realization of the life that you are anchoring. Yes?
Yes.
As you sow seeds into Soul Center, it's not about paying bills. We bring that up. It's not even about paying for this location, giving honor and gratitude to our guests, our speakers, our musicians, and everyone that is here. It's not even about the vision for a building and a facility. It's not merely about anything. Those are part of the field of your awareness. But the reality is, you're participating in the law of circulation. You are giving out, that what you give out is multiplied back to you in ways beyond your imagination. Imagining if you held a resource right here, and Spirit was trying to grow a crop of joy, of ecstasy, of healing, of a new job, of freedom in your life, but you kept it in your savings account. Instead of keeping it in your savings account, we invite you to deposit it into the field of infinite possibilities, that it may come up and sprout as the gratitude, as the plenitude, as the magnitude of your life. Yes?
Yes.
Ushers go forth. Sheila, sing a little something.
Hey, everybody.